Well, let's do this. Let's take our Bibles and turn to Job chapter 1, and let's see if we can at least get through the first two chapters, maybe the first three. And let me give you an assignment for tomorrow. I'm a professor, so I can do this. Okay? If you can take the time this evening, afternoon, evening, or tomorrow morning before our session, read through Job chapter 4 through about maybe chapter 31, if you can. Now, I know that's a lot, and you may not be able to do that. Okay? So that may be too much. So, let me just ask you to do this. I'm going to make it easy for you. Y'all aren't enrolled. Y'all are just auditors, so you don't have to take a test. You don't have to write a research paper. So let me just make it easy for you. Read through at least the first cycle of speeches, which is chapters 4 through 14. Okay? I bet most of you can do that. That'll give you context of the first part of what we talk about tomorrow. So just, if you can, overnight or in the morning, read through Job chapters 4 through 14. Okay? If you want to go a little further, good, but if you don't or can't, no problem. Fair enough? All righty. Okay. Well, let's launch right in and at least get through the first two chapters of Job. I'm going to take these paragraph by paragraph. I won't comment on every single verse or every single word. Try to give you the gist of what is happening here as we go through the book of Job. But look at the prologue, if you would, Job chapter 1, verses 1 through 5. There was a man in the country of Uz named Job. He was a man of complete integrity, who feared God, turned away from evil. He had 7 sons and 3 daughters. His estate included 7,000 sheep and goats, 3,000 camels, 500 yoke of oxen, 500 female donkeys, a very large number of servants. Job was the greatest man among all the people of the east. That would mean east of Israel. His sons used to take turns having banquets at their homes. They would send an invitation to their 3 sisters to eat and drink with them. Whenever a round of banqueting was over, Job would send for his children and purify them, rising early in the morning to offer burnt offerings for all of them, to God, by the way, offering those offerings. For Job thought, perhaps my children have sinned. Now notice the text doesn't say they had sinned. It's not like this is a drunken party where AC/DC's playing, It's not like that, right? Or whoever you like, the Babylonian Bee Gees or whoever your favorite group is, okay? Perhaps my children have sinned, have cursed God in their hearts. The text, by the way, doesn't say they did, all right? But Job says, in case they did, I want to cover theirs. I want to make sure that God forgives. And notice this was Job's regular practice. Wow. Job begins like the movie Star Wars. A long time ago in a galaxy far, far away. Job was written a long time ago, or the events occurred a long time ago. It's like a movie director here giving a press conference about the movie to explain and give a sneak peek. The curtain opens and here's Job. And we're introduced to this man by the name of Job. We are told that he lived in the country of Uz. As I already mentioned in answer to the question, we don't know exactly where Uz was located, but we think that it was east of Israel in what was known in the Bible times as Edom, that area, what would be known today as Jordan, right, in that area. And other than that, we really don't know anything. That's about it. But he was in that country. So notice he's not in Israel, but he's close. Because in that, the patriarchs still had the memory of what was happening, what God had done very, very early on after Noah's flood. And shortly, chapter 12, you got Abraham of Genesis. And so this man, Job's probably in that range somewhere. So this is maybe the oldest book chronologically in the Bible in terms of what's happening, maybe even in terms of writing, but for sure in terms of what is happening. Notice his description. He was a man of complete integrity. He feared God, and he turned away from evil. Notice those statements that are made about him. Unbelievable. He was a man of complete integrity. Man, I would love to have that written on my tombstone when I died. You know, David Allen, a man of integrity. There are a lot of worse things you could have written on your tombstone than that, right? He was a man of complete integrity. He was blameless, turning away from evil. The Hebrew word doesn't mean sinless. Okay? Nobody's sinless, including Job. Right? But he is blameless, and in terms of his character, he's a man of integrity, and this is a word that connotes complete integrity of character, innocence, wholeness, truthful living. Job was a man who took sin seriously. I mean, he just tried to live holy, live a holy life. He took sin seriously. He wanted to live in close fellowship with God, in obedience to God. This is who Job was. Furthermore, he was upright, the Hebrew word, describing morality in terms of conduct. The word in Hebrew means level or straight. So Job is not crooked. He's level and he's straight. He's a straight shooter, right? This is what it means to be a man of integrity who fears God and who turns away from evil. Therefore, he's pleasing. His motivations were pure. In his personal dealings with people, he was fair, he was honest, right? Now, many of you in here today could be described by this kind of language. You're not sinless, that's not what the language says, but you are trying to live your life in integrity before God and people as a Christian. That's your goal. And assuming, you're not a liar and a cheat and all of that, which I'm assuming you're not, then many of you could fall into this kind of category in one way or another when you think about it. In other words, Job was a good old boy, right? He fears God. He obeys God. He trusts God. He walks with God. So, not only is this true of Job spiritually speaking and character-wise, but look at his personal wealth. Job was not only godly, he was wealthy. 7,000 sheep, 3,000 camels, 500 yoke of oxen. That's a description of vast wealth. Camels were extremely expensive animals in that day and today because they're so workmanlike and needed in that area with desert, and everywhere. Camels are very, very valuable. And Job had a lot of them here. Not only that, look at his blessings with children. Job was blessed with many children, 7 sons and 3 daughters. So he's got 10 children. My grandfather was the 10th of 10 children. We don't know what it's like much to have families of 10 children today. My grandfather was raised on a farm in Valley Head, Alabama, and he was the youngest of 10 kids. He was born in 1911. And so we don't much know today what it's like to have a family of 10. You might have a family of 10, but that's rare. I mean, you might have 5 or 6, and even that's pretty unusual. I had 4 children, right? But 10, oh my. He has 10 children. 7 sons and 3 daughters, right? By the way, there's no reason not to interpret these numbers literally. This isn't symbolic. He had 3 or 4 kids, 10 being a number of perfection. No, he had 10 kids according to Scripture. No reason to spiritualize this. And it was the habit of kids, and this is cultural, by the way, in that time. periodically to have a banquet. And they would all come together in one house under one roof, and they would have a big party. Now, there's no indication, there's no statement here that this was a drunken carousal party. For one thing, it's just the brothers and sisters, right? So, pretty hard to get in too much trouble like that, although you could, but, it's just pretty more difficult. But there's no statement in the text. Don't read into the text what's not there. The text doesn't say that this was somehow bad or that there was some problem with this. Now, that doesn't mean, again, we're arguing from silence either way. It doesn't mean that there might not have been, maybe somebody got drunk. I mean, who knows? But I'm just pointing out, the text doesn't say that. But whenever his children would gather together, maybe on birthdays, right, to do that, that would be a logical thing. And that would mean they're roughly doing that 10 times a year, right, celebrating somebody's birthday. Job was concerned to make sure his kids didn't disobey God or speak against God. Now there's a godly father right there. That tells you a lot about Job as a father. Now these children are grown, or at least they're teenagers and above. The implication is they're not small children, right? And so Job would rise early in the morning to offer burnt offerings. He's functioning as a priest. He's interceding to God on behalf of his children. Lord, I don't know that Bill and Susan and Michael and Tammy sinned against you, but if they did, I'm pleading with you, oh God, forgive my children. Tells you a lot about him right there, right? By the way, Richard Halverson, does that name ring a bell? Chaplain of the Senate years ago. He once prayed in the Senate, forgive those of us who give family such a low priority. Help the senators not to be so busy trying to save the nation that they let their children go to hell. That was his prayer in the United States Senate. That's pretty good prayer. Pretty good prayer. So, Job, notice all of this, he is described as a man who is the greatest among all the people of the East. In other words, that phrase in Hebrew was often applied to Arab races that dwelt anywhere between the Nile and the Euphrates River. Everywhere between the Nile River and the Euphrates River. So Egypt, all the way up through Israel, all the way into Arabia, what would be known as Jordan today, what would be known as Syria today, that whole region there. He was the greatest at this particular time. That's saying a lot, right? He was the wealthiest man, largest stockholder on the Wall Street of the East. And so, this is how the book of Job begins. Man, everything's great. Right? Oh, but look at verse 6. One day, the sons of God came to present themselves before the Lord, and Satan also came with them. Now notice the shift scenes from where to where. The scene shifts from earth to heaven. Now this can only be given by God's revelation. No human being would know this. But God can reveal this, which obviously He has. So the sons of God, that is a reference to the angelic beings. In the Old Testament, the angels are called the sons of God. So the angelic beings periodically, apparently, have to come to a council meeting with the Lord. And furthermore, Satan, we are told, also came with them. Among them was Satan. So here's the scene of a council, and the Lord is the head of the council, and all of His angelic beings, or at least the angelic leaders, Michael, Gabriel, whoever the leaders are, and angels, just like demons, angels have an organizational structure to them, Scripture reveals, right? And so here they are, seated or coming to stand in the presence of God. Furthermore, notice this. This is after the fall of Satan. And notice that Satan is required to be there. Don't think for 1 minute he's showing up of his own free will. Remember what Luther said, even the devil is God's devil. Satan does not have all power, God does. All right? So, in the Hebrew text, the name Satan there has the definite article in front of it, so it literally reads, the Satan. The Satan, which is something of a title as much as a name. Now, who is Satan? He is a personal being. He was a created angel who was created as an angel of light, but who fell into sin and rebelled against God. Now, there's no reason not to identify this character here with the Satan of the rest of the Bible. There's no reason to call him somebody different. There are a few scholars who want to say this is a different being. No evidence for that. This is the same Satan that Jesus dealt with in his temptation in the wilderness, and that's going to be defeated in the book of Revelation. Same person. Same person. He's called the Satan. Satan is referenced, by the way, in Genesis chapter 3. He's referenced in Isaiah 14 and in Ezekiel 28. And by the way, Satan, it's very interesting, there are 3 times where Satan is stated to be accusing somebody. In Genesis 3, he accuses God to Eve. Right? In Job, he accuses God about Job. And in Matthew and Luke's temptation narrative, he accuses the God-man, Jesus. There are 3 times that there's a definite statement about Satan accusing somebody. Now, he's called the accuser of the brethren, but I'm just saying there are 3 specific examples. In Genesis 3, he accuses God, or he criticizes God to Eve. He accuses God to Eve. In Job, he accuses God about Job. Right? And in Matthew and Luke, in the temptation narrative there, he accuses and tempts the God-man, Jesus himself. Very fascinating. Old Satan here. Now, so, notice the Lord asked Satan, "From whence do you come?" Now, let me give you a little clue here. Anytime God asks a question in the Bible, he already knows the answer. God is never asking for direction or for knowledge, right? God doesn't need to ask, how to get from here to Dallas. All right, he already knows. So when you have God asking questions, Adam, where are you? God knows where Adam is in Genesis 3. He's not asking for information. He's God. This is what we call a way the story is told. A narrator expresses things here, right? And so even though God asked the question, he already knows the answer, but he asked Satan, "Where have you come from?" "From roaming through the earth," Satan answered him, "and walking around on it." In other words, God is asking Satan, "What have you been up to? Give an account. What's been happening? Fill me in. Tell me about it." Right? Satan is a world traveler. 1 Peter 5:8 says he walks about the whole world seeking whom he may devour. He could have sung Johnny Cash's song, "I've Been Everywhere, Man." If you're a Johnny Cash fan. My dad was. So, he's been around. Now, you can almost picture old Satan in this scene. Here are all the angels of God, the other angels, and Satan representing the demonic, and he's over there off to the back, to the side, leaning against a wall with a foot up against the wall and a toothpick picking his teeth. You can almost see it. Right? And apparently his job description indicates that he includes, his job description includes inspection of what's going on the earth and examination. He's like an unspiritual detective walking up and down the world with clipboard in hand. It's like an emperor's spy. He's looking for any disloyalty to the crown. So there's several surprising twists here. I want you to look carefully at verse 8. The Lord said to Satan, "Have you considered my servant Job?" The striking thing about this account is it's not Satan who initiated the conversation about Job. It's God who did. And here's God saying, "Have you considered my servant?" Look at that title, "My servant Job," that description. Have you considered my servant Job? Wouldn't you like to know? Now, God will never tell you this, so don't expect it. But wouldn't it be nice if you knew? Wouldn't you love to know that God, to another angel, describes you as his servant? I'd like that. Have you considered my servant Job? But God's not going to do that to you. Don't expect that. You're never going to get a thank you letter in the mail from God. Thank you for living for me and serving me, going to that church, giving your tithe. You're never going to hear that. You're never going to get that. God's not in the habit of giving out thank you notes for what you should be doing anyway. But he says to Satan, "Have you considered my servant Job?" No one else is like him on earth. Perfect in his integrity, who fears God and turns away from evil. That is the Lord's assessment of Job's character. Oh boy, I hope and pray the Lord will assess my character that way. Wow. What a blurb on Job's biography. What a statement on his resume. What a profile on his LinkedIn. Wow. On his Facebook. Have you noticed my servant Job? So the divine fisherman, God, goes fishing, and Satan takes the bait. Don't forget who brought this up. Satan doesn't come to God accusing Job. Satan had already figured, well, God's protected him and he's serving God, and there's no way I can thwart that. So Satan doesn't bring it up. But what does Satan do? How does Satan respond? Verse 9. Does Job fear God for nothing? I want you to look at that question right there. Satan is essentially accusing Job of worshiping God and fearing God for what he can get out of God. Now, here's what's interesting. With Job, that is actually an egregious slur. It's false, but with some Christians it's true. And with some people it's true. They'll use God to get what they can get out of it. And they'll serve God as long as God gives them what they want. But then when that doesn't happen, they'll turn on him. Now let's just be real. There are some people like that in the world. Does Job serve God, fear God for nothing? Haven't you placed a hedge around him, his house, everything he owns? You blessed the works of his hands. You blessed his possessions. They've increased. Right? In other words, Job is serving you because you've blessed him. Not because of who you are, God, but because of what you've done for him. Now see, stop right there and just ask yourself. No answer out loud or anything. Just ask yourself. Do you love God, and are you serving him today for who he is or for what he can do for you? So Satan accuses Job before God. And then Satan says, stretch out your hand, strike everything he owns, and he will curse you to your face. Satan says in a cynical way, look, God, the wool's been pulled over your eyes. Let me tell you how this works. If you create a problem for him, put a thorn in his side, take away his possessions or whatever, he'll curse you to your face. He won't continue to worship you or walk with you. He will then curse you to your face. You have pampered him. You've built a hedge around him. You've given him everything he needs. You think Job serves you out of the goodness of his heart? Ha! He serves you for what he can get out of you. That's what Satan says. So Satan, by the way, is not able to point out any sinful action in Job. Did you notice that? Have you considered my servant Job? Yeah, but God, I noticed 3 weeks ago when he lusted after so-and-so and committed adultery with her. You notice there's none of that? Because Satan knows that what is said about Job is absolutely true. He is upright. He is a godly man. God knows it, and so does Satan. So Satan doesn't probe Job on his actions. What does he accuse Job of with God? His motivation. What's his real motive, God? You blessed him, so he's serving you because you blessed him. That's his motivation. He doesn't really love you, doesn't really care about you, and he'll turn on you and curse you the moment you take away all of this stuff from him. One of the great Methodist preachers of years gone by was a man named Clovis Chappell. I've collected he wrote a bunch of sermon books of his sermons. I've collected all of them in my library. This is what he said. It is shrewd, Satan is shrewd, and he says this, it is shrewd because it attains all the weight of an assertion without incurring any of the risks. A slanderer who makes a positive assertion runs a twofold risk. First, he's in danger of being detected. He runs the risk of embarrassment by being caught in a lie. Therefore, advises Satan, if you are out to slander somebody, put your lie in the form of a question. Then you'll be safe. Nobody can prove you're lying if you merely ask a question. That is a good point. So what does Satan do? He just raises a question. He asks a question. Does Job fear God for nothing? Wow. So what is Satan's theory? Satan's theory is, hey, people serve you for what they can get out of you. That's Satan's viewpoint. That's his theology. People worship God for self-profit. That's what Satan is saying. You think Job cares about you for your own sake? You're crazy. No. Job is using you as an insurance policy against loss of blessing. Satan is the vulture who claims to be a mockingbird. That's who he is. And so, what's the result of all of that? Satan says, you stretch out your hand, strike everything he owns. And what will he do? He will curse you to your face. Now keep that in mind. Hold that in your mind. He will curse you to your face. Verse 12 is shocking to me. Very well, the Lord told Satan, everything he owns is in your power, but don't lay a hand on Job himself. God gives Satan permission to test Job. Now, why in the world he does that? God's not baited into anything. He's not like you and me. So it's not like God gets tricked or baited into this by Satan or whatever. God knows exactly what he's doing. There's purpose in what he's doing. We don't always see and know exactly what that purpose is. But for whatever reason, God gives Satan permission to take things away from Job, but without touching Job's body or life himself. So we're told Satan left the Lord's presence. Verse 13, one day, we don't know how long after this, A day, a week, a month, 6 months? One day, when Job's sons and daughters were eating and drinking wine in their oldest brother's house, a messenger came to Job and reported, while the oxen were plowing, donkeys grazing, the Sabaeans swooped down and took them away. They struck down the servants with the sword. I alone have escaped to tell you. While he was still speaking, another messenger came and reported, God's fire fell from heaven. It burned the sheep, the servants, and devoured them. I alone have escaped to tell you. While that messenger was still speaking, yet another came, said the Chaldeans formed 3 bands, made a raid on the camels, took them away, struck down the servants with the sword, and I alone have escaped to tell you. While he was still speaking, another came and reported, your sons and daughters were eating and drinking wine in their oldest brother's house. A powerful wind swept in from the desert, struck the 4 corners of the house. It collapsed on the young people so that they died, and I alone am left to tell you about it. Now, let's not let this go by too quickly. Let's let the gravity of this sink in for a minute. Put yourself in Job's shoes. In one day, everything falls apart. In one day, tragedy after tragedy after tragedy, not just bumps in the road, devastating tragedy, an avalanche of woes cascaded over Job. All in a single day. All his livestock, all his sheep, all his camels, which was the bulk of his wealth, and then his greatest wealth of all. Not 1, not 2, not 5, all of his children were killed. Now, if you read this carefully and look at it and look at a Bible atlas and the geography, the Sabaeans live, they're in the region of southeast Arabia, known today as the country of Yemen. The fire of God that falls, the Chaldeans are from the lower part of the Mesopotamian valley near modern-day Kuwait. And the great wind that comes, that destroys the house where Job's children are, I want you to notice that the text says that from each of the 4 corners of the compass do these tragedies come. One comes from the north, one from the south, one from the east, and one from the west. And Job's faith in one day is T-boned, and in a single day wiped out, where he has nothing left but bankruptcy and 10 graves. Can you imagine? Let that sink in for just a minute. Don't run by that too quickly. And let me just ask you, not for a response, but what would you have done? And what would you have said? You know, I really can't imagine that. I have 4 children grown, and I have 9 grandchildren. What would I think, what would I say, and what would I do if I learned that in one day all 4 of my grown children and all 9 of my grandchildren perished? I don't even know how to think about that, much less answer that question, and nor do you. Imagine. All of the financial loss and all of the personal family loss. I doubt that there's not much more suffering that you can imagine outside of physical suffering, and even that's about to come. with that description of what Job lost. So I'm just startled by all of that. It's difficult for me to take it in. I'm even more startled by verses 20 and 21. Then Job stood up, tore his robe, shaved his head. That was very customary in that day and time, in that culture. Tore his robe, shaved his head, fell to the ground. I would too. I wouldn't be standing. I remember when I was a pastor in my first church, and I was the coach of my youngest son's Little League baseball team, and we were out on a little practice field in Garland, Texas, on a spring afternoon. And a police cruiser pulled up and got out and talked to my friend Steve Brock, who was over around first base area, helping me coach the kids. His sons were playing too. And I heard him ask, "Is David Allen here?" And my heart immediately sank, fear. First thing, I know one of my sons is here, but my two daughters, another son, and my wife, and so immediately you start thinking the worst. And so he points me out, and the police officer calls me over, and I go, and he says, "I need you to come with me right now." By the way, they won't do this nowadays, but he said, "I need you to come with me now. We're going to the hospital." He said, "One of your church members, one of their 3-year-old children fell into the pool, and the parents didn't get him out quick enough, and he died. And they're at the hospital. Your wife is there, and some of your church members are there, but they need you. You need to come." I got in his car, drove 2 miles to the hospital, went in the room where they were, and crumpled in the corner of the room, was a little petite mother, member of my church, sweet lady, petite mother, and her 6'2" husband, big, hefty guy, strong, athletic, was crumpled on the floor, his arms around her, and they were weeping their eyes out. I walked into the room. I saw my wife. I saw the chairman of my deacons over there, 2 or 3 other church family. And I just walked over to them and kind of knelt down with them, put my arms around them, and just cried with them. I remember that like it happened yesterday. It was a tragedy that occurred. Job, we're told, he fell to the ground. And then the most amazing thing. Verse 20 says, "And he worshiped." What? You've got to be kidding me. He fell to the ground and he worshiped. He worshiped God. Now again, I'm not asking for raised hands or verbalization, but I'm going to ask anyway without any response. Is that what you would have done or I would have done in that situation? He fell to the ground and he worshiped. And then listen to what he says. Verse 21. Naked I came from my mother's womb. Naked I will leave this life. The Lord gives and the Lord takes away. Blessed be the name of the Lord. Now, ladies and gentlemen, I submit to you that there is a man who knows his God and who knows the Word of God and who has his biblical compass right. And he doesn't blame God and he doesn't curse God, and he doesn't even ask why. He doesn't do any of that. We're told he worships. He worships. What that tells me is that Job's piety was not dependent upon his prosperity. Is yours? His piety is not dependent upon his prosperity. He doesn't claim his rights. He doesn't claim his privileges. You see, you and I need to make sure that we understand something as Christians saved by the grace of God. And it is this. Now just think with me. God owns you. He does not owe you. God owns you. He does not owe you. He owes you nothing. Your salvation, my salvation, is a matter of grace. Can't be earned. Can't be worked for. Can't pay enough money for it. It's all a matter of grace. Life begins without privilege. It's a gift of God, and it ends without advantage. You take nothing with you into eternity. Can't do it. God owns all and has the right to do what He pleases. Job recognizes that. Tom Elliff was the president of the International Mission Board of the Southern Baptist Convention. Some of you are Southern Baptists, so you will remember that name. Very godly man. A few years ago, his wife passed away of cancer. Tom told me this. He said, I was in the hospital room with her a few days. She had had cancer, been fighting it for some time, and a few days before she died. And Tom said, I just kind of lost it with God. He'd been a pastor for years, Christian for years, written books, godly man, taught all over the place. Head of the International Mission Board, 4,000 missionaries scattered around the world. He's the head of that. But he told me, he said, I just kind of lost it with God, and I got pretty upset with God in that hospital room with my wife lying there on that bed dying of cancer. And he said, I fussed at God a little bit. And he said, not an audible voice, but as clearly as if it were. Listen. He said, God spoke to me. And he said he pointed to her body there on the bed. And God said, Tom said, I just sensed God saying to me, yours or mine? Yours or mine? God is the owner of all of us. He is the one in control. And Job is telling us in all things the Lord is to be praised. And so Job says, blessed be the name of the Lord. Even though he could have said, I've served you faithfully, and now what do I have? Empty fields and empty barns and 10 graves. Thanks, God. But not on your life does he do that. And furthermore, the prologue here makes this crystal clear that Job is not experiencing any of this suffering because of his own sin. None of this is because of his own sin. Nor does the text say that his kids died because of their sin. It doesn't say that. We've got to make sure we get all of that clear. Blessed be the name of the Lord. Now wait a minute. What did Satan say to God? Take it all away, and what will he do? He'll curse you. And yet what does Job do? Blessed be the name of the Lord. God 1, Satan 0. There's a reason for all this, even though Job doesn't have a clue what it is. And we don't fully know everything either. But look at verse 22. This is important. And I realize we're moving slower on this. We'll pick up. We'll get faster tomorrow. Throughout all this, Job did not sin or blame God for anything. Now that tells me that God is very keen on the fact that when problems and suffering come to my life, I don't respond verbally in a sinful way. I better watch what I say. And you see, if you watch what you think, it's a lot easier to watch what you say. Throughout all of this, Job did not sin or blame God for anything. Can you imagine? Now, let's hurry on because I want to get to questions here in a minute. Chapter 2. So, one day the sons of God came again to present themselves before the Lord. Satan also came. The Lord said, "Where have you been? Where have you come from?" "Well, I've been roaming the earth," Satan answered him, "and walking around on it." Exact same response. The Lord said to Satan, "Have you considered my servant Job? No one else on earth is like him, a man of perfect integrity who fears God and turns away from evil." Exact same words, not just similar, the exact same words in the previous chapter that God said about Job to Satan. Exact same words in Hebrew as well as in English translation. Except God now adds, he still retains his integrity. You were wrong, Satan. He still retains his integrity, even though you incited me against him to destroy him for no good reason. Now, Satan is a sore loser. So he's already lost one round, so here he comes with round 2. And he says, skin for skin. That's an old Middle Eastern saying. Satan answered the Lord, "A man will give up everything he owns in exchange for his life. Stretch out your hand, strike his flesh and bones, and then he'll curse you to your face." Now, here I'm just going to show you my limited human knowledge. If I were God, which I'm, obviously not. But at this point, I would say, enough with you. We're not going down that road. God says, okay, you can do anything to him physically, only do not take his life. You got to be kidding me. After all of that, now God is going to allow this to Job? Allow Satan to do that to Job? Very well, the Lord told Satan, he's in your power. Only spare his life. Satan left the Lord's presence, and he infected Job with terrible boils from the soles of his feet to the top of his head. Now, we do not know beyond that exactly what that was. Was it a form of leprosy? Was it something else? We don't know. By the way, have you ever had a boil? A few of you have. I had one time. There is hardly anything more painful. You just touch it and it's painful. Imagine being covered, top of your head, sole of your feet. Imagine. And so, Job, verse 8, took a piece of broken pottery to scrape himself while he sat among the ashes. Golly. That'd be the only way to bring relief, the itching and so forth. The ashes means the trash dump, the landfill outside of the city. That's where Job is going to spend a lot of time now for a while. His posture of sitting on the ground was an ancient sign of suffering. Now, in the midst of all of this, you might be wondering, where is Mrs. Job? After all, these are her kids too. And his wife said to him in verse 9, "Are you still holding on to your integrity? Curse God and die." Now, there comes a time in a marriage where two godly people when the pressure is really on, one can snap and say or do something stupid, and not just stupid, which we can laugh about later. Yeah, that was dumb. I should have. No, stupid. The word here for foolish means morally reprehensible to God. When Job says, you speak as one of the foolish women, he's not just saying you're a foolish woman, He's saying you are speaking contrary to truth and impugning God. And you are morally sinful before God. So now watch this. I know we're going a little long here, but we won't do that tomorrow. But now watch this. Even in all this, Job's focus is on the integrity of God. And he tells his wife, you're being silly, you're being stupid, you're being ungodly, you're sinning against God. And she was. Do you still hold on to your integrity? Look what God's allowed to happen to you, son. Husband, curse God and die. And Job's response is, you speak as a foolish woman. Should we, listen to his reasoning, should we accept only good from God and not adversity? Well, there's a good question. We don't mind receiving the good from God, do we? If God showers you with $10,000 you didn't know was coming, you're okay with that, right? Sure you are. Me too. Right? But what if God allows you, or causes, either one, allows or causes, what if God permits adversity in your life? You see, Job says, why should we not understand that we must receive both? And he says this to his wife. And then we're told a second time, throughout all of this, in verse 10, Job did not sin in what he said. Do you see the focus of the narrator and the Spirit of God who's inspired this? A second time we're told Job did not sin in what he said. Which of us has not sinned in what we've said, even in just the last 24 hours? Much less in this kind of pressure. Not sinned in what we've said. Wow. It's unbelievable. So, Job is tested beyond what anybody's ever been tested. But suffering is inevitable, but hey, God is still in control. And Job has never lost sight of that. Which is why he's about to have a serious sit down and come to Jesus meeting with God. Or he's going to try to. And even then, he's not going to get the upper hand. God will. As God will always get the upper hand with you and me. So his three friends, Eliphaz, Bildad, and Zophar, heard about all of this. They're wise men too. And they're friends of Job, and they come from far away. And when they get from a distance, they see him over there, and they can't recognize him. He lost so much weight. He's haggard. They can't believe, they can't even recognize him. And what do? They arrive. They wept aloud. They tore their robes, threw dust in the air and on his head, which is customary. That's a custom. And then they sat on the ground with him 7 days. No one spoke a word because they saw his suffering was very intense. To this point, his friends have done well. They've come. They've showed up. They're weeping with him. They are crying with him. They are grieving with him. And they're not dropping a bunch of foolish platitudes on him. Because there's a time when what you need is just a ministry of presence. That day when I walked into that hospital room and they were crumpled in the corner, I didn't go over there and start talking to them immediately. I just went over there, put my arms around them, and just cried with them. For a while, we didn't say a word. Because people in that situation of suffering, they just need your presence. They don't need you to say it now, it'll be all right. No, it's not all right. It's easy for you to say that. Sometimes we think we have to say something, so we blurt out dumb things. Don't do that. At least at this point, Job's friends have not done that. And that's the beginning of the story. Now there's lots more, which we'll get into tomorrow. Job's opening speech in chapter 3. We'll not broach that. We'll just cover a lot of ground tomorrow. Questions? Because our times, I want to respect your time, but I do want to ask or give you opportunity to ask any questions or anything you want to share. Questions, whatever. Yes, ma'am. Well, it is according to this, even though we're not told about this in any other setting in Scripture, but according to this, not only the angels of God accountable to God, but even Satan is accountable to God and periodically must come and give an account to God. That would seem to be what we learn from these two chapters. Yeah. Yes. In a sense, but you got to remember what kind of master we have. He is a benevolent master that we serve. Satan, you see, you can either serve sin and go to hell, or you can serve God and go to heaven. Which do you want to do? I mean, that's your choice. So either way, you're going to be a slave to somebody. You're going to be a slave to your sin and yourself, or are you going to let Jesus be your master? But Jesus is a benevolent master. Remember what the Lord does. He's the one who takes the towel, disrobes, takes the towel, and washes the disciples' feet. That's your master. He's the one who goes to the cross to make it possible for you to go to heaven. That's our master. I don't mind being a slave to that master, even though the word slave is not the right word really textually. I don't mind being a servant to a master like that. I'd a whole lot rather serve Jesus than the devil. Because I know where he's going. And I don't want to go where he's going. Right? You see, nobody lives your own life on your own terms apart from God or even Satan's temptation of you. Nobody does that. You're not your own man or woman. You're not in complete control. You think you're in complete control? Just wait. None of us is in complete control. Right? We are dependent creatures. Dependent creatures. Anybody else? Yes, sir. Well, no, the first time he gave specific instructions. You can't touch Job. And he didn't the first time. The second time, he asked permission from God to touch Job, and God says, I'll let you do it, you just can't take his life. God gave him, in both cases, God had to give permission. Now that encourages me, because do you remember what Corrie ten Boom said? Corrie ten Boom, who hid those Jews during the Second World War, the little Dutch lady. Have you ever heard her testimony? Or get online, click on her name, and listen to her for a little bit. What a godly woman. Lived in a concentration camp and was released on an error by, in my view, the sovereignty of God. Clerical error let her out. She would have died there, right, with her sister. And she said in her Dutch accent, be careful that you don't hold things of your life too tightly, because if you do, she said in her wonderful accent, it will hurt when the Heavenly Father pries your fingers open. You hold on too tightly, and it will hurt when the Heavenly Father pries your fingers open. Now, there's from a lady who knows. Ever been in a concentration camp? Yeah, not me neither. But she was. She was. Lots of deep stuff here. Lots of deep stuff here. Anybody else? Okay. Well, we're getting into it. We're learning some things. We're going to learn a lot more tomorrow. And Wednesday, we're going to hear from God. We're going to see what God says about it. Tomorrow, we're going to hear Job's three friends and Job talk about it. Right? We're going to hear their back and forth. And they're going to come and they're going to essentially say, Job, now come on, fess up. You did something bad and the retribution principle is in play. Just confess that to God and He'll make it right. And Job's going to call them a windbag and a bunch of other bad names. His friends. And so it gets pretty interesting coming up tomorrow. And then finally, God shows up and speaks. That's going to be the fun part on Wednesday, when God speaks. And I can tell you this, when God speaks, everybody else listens in Job, in the book. Nobody else is going to try to interact with God. They're just going to listen to God. Are you with me? All right. I'll see you, Lord willing, tomorrow, noon for food, and 12:30 we'll get started. Amen? God bless you. You're dismissed.